Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you'll hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Well, we're back with another episode of The Singles. These are shorter episodes where I chat to Dan and Jasper from Tracksuit, and using the power of Tracksuit data, we analyze some of the biggest stories in marketing that are out there at the moment. Of course, if you haven't heard, Tracksuit is the always on beautiful brand tracking dashboard that has disrupted brand tracking for so many brands out there. If you're a consumer brand and you aren't doing your brand tracking more than once a year, in fact some brands can't even afford to do it once a year, so you're in the dark. Well, Tracksuit has come along like a knight in shining armor and is offering you always on brand tracking with an incredibly intuitive dashboard that's able to give you insights right the way through the funnel. And what's even better about Tracksuit is you're able to share it far and wide. You're not restricted to, 2 or 3 seats. You're able to share it across the company. So everyone starts to have the same shared language and understanding about brand tracking and the importance of it for your business. So check out gotracksuit.com. If you've enjoyed That's What I Call Marketing and can rate or review it, please do. It really does help us reach an engaged community of marketers just like you. And honestly, that one small thing genuinely does really help us reach a new audience. In today's episode with Dan and Jasper, we are going to take a look back at Cannes. We're going to talk a bit about some of the big stories and the big wins at Cannes and the controversy that came out of Cannes. Really interested to hear the guys' perspective on. We talk about the delivery market in the US, so UberEats and DoorDash. So really looking at how those brands are tracking and what they're doing to try gain really, really important customer numbers and looking at where they are in terms of their brand health on usage. And then we take a look at AI. In fact, AI just kind of forms part of all of our conversation today, but we take a look at some of the big topics in AI at the moment as well. So if you are ready, so are we. Let's get into this episode of The Singles with Dan and Jasper from Tracksuit. Another episode of The Singles, and we've a lot to catch up on since we last saw each other in person for the first time south of France. Who's giving out about that
one? What a sweaty first meeting it was.
I know. I did notice, Connor, is you were rocking a That's What I Call Marketing on Tour t-shirt. So the next time we see each other, we'll have to get our hands on one of those as well.
Yeah, I had all my music-related branding things. My kids were even saying, you're just stealing other people's. I'm not. I'm influenced. It's influenced by things. I was a bit like Elvis Presley at certain moments with a handkerchief and trying to dab the sweat. But nobody needs to hear
on the topic of merch, I think I did remind you. I lost my water bottle out there.
You did remind me you lost your water bottle. Yeah.
Is any?
No, it's on my to-do list. Well, listen, obviously coming out of Cannes, a lot goes on there, but a big part of Cannes obviously is winners and the incredible work that gets showcased at Cannes. I went down to that space in the bottom of the Palais, looked at the work, and it is truly amazing. Just the power of creativity. I think it's something we all believe in and value, and can kind of see the commercial impact of the power of creativity. But were there any kind of winners that stood out for you as you kind of reflected on all the winners? Because there's a lot of them.
Yeah, I think to kick things off was Dove's Real Beauty Redefined for the AI Era campaign, which was made with Ogilvy New York and Pinterest. And it won the Grand Prix in media out there. And essentially the campaign itself, it really is incredibly powerful. So it reaffirms Dove's 20-year commitment to showcasing real, unretouched women, but with a bold kind of different angle to it. So they were taking a clear stance against AI-generated beauty ideals. So for those that might, the campaign launched with a film that showed AI-generated images of women based on beauty stereotypes, contrasted against driving home the message, real beauty is not generated. Now, this campaign is culturally relevant because it tackles the growing influence of generative AI. And of course, AI will be a topic we come on to, but in shaping beauty standards. And what Dun have done here is successfully reignite the conversation around authenticity in media, which is obviously, again, another kind of critical part to its sort of embedment within campaign work. and ultimately strengthen the global brand trust and cement its legacy as a leader in purpose-driven marketing. Now, when we look to correlate that with our data in the US body care category, this really supports the success the campaign's achieved here. So Dove's leading on two critical factors and drivers in, so those being trust and relatability. And over the past year, Dove's funnel has remained stable and strong, but notably trust has grown. So among those aware of the brand, trust rose 2 percentage points from 59 to 61%. And among females, trust jumped 4 percentage points from 59 to 63%. And for 18 to 34-year-olds, 56 to 60% as well. So yeah, campaign, and we're really sort of starting to see the success of it coming through in our data as well.
What's brilliant about that is that campaign, as you said, like it's been around a long time, Real Beauty, and how that has evolved. And each time they seem to do something with it, it kind of does take your breath away slightly how they're able to continue to have fresh consistency around the idea. Probably a little bit terrifying that it's still an issue that needs to be addressed. You know, the idea of real beauty, and as you say, probably exasperated in a world of AI where a lot of the images are quite perfect.
No, completely. And I think this is where I imagine that authenticity piece ties in so strongly with relatability. And that association is for people like me has remained steady, which is crucial because that perception is even stronger driving of conversion for the brand. But what's interest, which is the platform they partner with on the camp, that we can see that that's used by 22% of the category consumers overall. The usage climbs to 31% amongst women and 28% among 18 to 34-year-olds within the same group where we saw the biggest trust growth. And I think if we were to look more specifically at the campaign itself and what it achieved, it was over 4 billion earned impressions, over 500 million views globally, 94% positive sentiment. And I just think what's important to remember here is the campaign, for Dove and for Ogilvy and for Pinterest, it's not just a creative win. It's driving real tangible momentum with Dove's core audiences, and with trust growing, relatability holding firm, that ultimately sets up the clearest opportunity for them to keep building on both moving forward.
Amazing. And those trust scores are phenomenal. I take that.
Yeah. It does seem like relatability is just a constant brand perception that drives campaigns, but then funnels that we see and which we'll get to within our data, is that just seems to be just the common attribute along with trust that just needs to consistently be hit.
Yeah, definitely. And it's and again, so you touched on it there, but like it's a brilliant idea. It's creative execution of it, but it's commercial impact, and that's because people, I think, Dove's probably one of the first purpose brands that leaned into purpose. I don't think it was built on purpose, but it was one of the first to kind of go into the purpose territory. And while others have kind of gone in and gone out, unless they're purpose to the core brands, which I think is very different, Dove have remained committed to this. And let's be honest, it's obviously having a commercial impact for them. Like, they're not doing this, they're doing it for good reasons, I'm sure, somewhere, but it's also like their P&L is being helped.
Yes, completely. And I also think it's important to acknowledge kind of the attributions of those associations sort of relative to what the category is. And I think what I mean by that is, for Dove, obviously within the body care category, sitting within the beauty space, so a space which is obviously an incredibly important aspect for women and people to feel like they can go out to be their authentic people. Relatability will always be something which they'll want to connect with, as opposed to in this world of social media and AI again, where authenticity is something that can be very easily sort of cross the line on. Suddenly people feel disconnected, and perhaps that they don't feel their best relative to these generated images. I think the fact that you've got this brand that is, again, taking that purpose-driven approach to be able to really kind of tap in what is important to the person, individual, as opposed to this broader ideal and this sort of stereotypical view.
Which just again, because of the scale of a lot of the platforms and how the algorithms can work, and kind of showing people images of perfection when they're low. You know what I mean? Like, it's really important that someone that has scale and reach, like Dove has, that they can do this. Other campaigns, then, one I think is a great brand and has done some brilliant work recently is Telstra. So for people that don't know Telstra. Anyone want to give the overview? Maybe someone who knows the local market might give us the overview of Telstra.
Telstra, for those that don't know, although I'm an Optus customer, Telstra is Australia's leading telecommunications company, and I think beyond that, team is just like a phenomenal outfit, and which we'll get into in terms of but yes, in terms of a company, it's one of Australia's darling corporates. And the leading telecommunications company that, for whatever reason, when I was 13 or 14, I think Optus had a better deal.
Who said brand loyalty?
Yeah. It just wasn't relatable at the time.
Their work, the Better on a Better campaign, that scooped the Grand Prix, Film Craft Grand Prix, and a campaign this year. And again, I mean, it is another fantastic campaign. It's very funny, very clever, very Australian, and it was.
Yeah.
And ultimately, so the campaign itself, again for context, was launched in partnership with Bear Meets Eagle on Fire, Plus 61, and OMD Australia. And essentially, to give listeners an overview, in case, again, you haven't seen it, it features 26 stop-motion films, each spotlighting a different part of Australia and the unique kind of quirky characters that live there. And essentially, it's built around a simple idea, which is everywhere is better on a better network. And the execution leans fully into distinctively Australian storytelling. So here's to the scenery. And ultimately, the campaign, it's working, and that's obviously from the accolades that it's scooping, but also from what we've kind of brought broadly within our data, which is while category-wide penetration has dropped significantly, and that's from 78 to 65% over the last year, Telstra's brand funnel has held steady and strong. So the brand's leading on two key conversion drivers. So 37% of those who are aware of Telstra say it's a brand they trust, and 42% say it's reliable, both top of the category. And then it's important, though, to perhaps acknowledge that that's not necessarily without its challenges. So open-ended responses have also surfaced mixed views on service quality, and there were some concerns around pricing. So I think here is that the campaign is a strong reinforcement of its category leadership and its foundations. So trust, reliability, and that Australian identity, which are keeping it resilient. But I had a brilliant quote in LBB from the CMO, Brent Smart, who said the telco's campaign shows that the biggest brands can be the most creative, and that this campaign was the biggest improvement in non-customer reputation of any campaign they've run, which I thought was really interesting.
I hadn't seen that. That's amazing. He's doing some really impressive work. I've read articles and seen him talking in other places, and it's really interesting to see, again, the impact he is having, pushing, I think, things forward and leaning on creativity, brand led, because again, it's a utility. It's kind of a functional thing, unless you're Dan and you're really.
It's so true though, because they are really leaning into emotional storytelling when a lot of telcos can just be questionable around coverage, service quality, pricing, which is all really important. But Telstra seem to just consistently build campaigns and really, to your point, Jasper, double down on the Australian heritage, which is really epic to see from the market leader, where they could be very rational, but definitely pushing on emotion.
I think just to very quickly build on it as well, back to that quote around the biggest brands can be the most creative. I think it was an episode we spoke about previously, and Dan, I think you mentioned about or made the point about how brands, almost irrespective of size, can reshape that approach to take more of that sort of disruptive look on things. So it's not necessarily to do with the fact that it needs to be a disruptive brand to make disruptive work. You can still have these heritage market or category leading brands who can still adopt an incredibly creatively driven approach. And again, like the way you see that executed and the fact that they've gone on to win what they have and they have through the campaign, I think just speaks volumes to that point as well.
Yeah. Completely. I think it's arguably more beneficial the more commoditized and boring your category is.
Yeah. And you're right. Like when everyone's talking about coverage and all that kind of stuff, like I expect my phone will have good coverage. Do you know what I mean?
Negotiables,
yeah. Look, before we kind of move off Cannes, I think one of the big stories that came out of Cannes was, I guess, the controversy for Consul. So this was the Brazilian, I guess, like a Curry's, who recognized through their data that lots of Brazilian families had old white goods that were using up a lot of electricity. And so the campaign was all about getting new white goods like refrigerators to them. They would then be able to see the savings they made on their electricity bills, and that became the repayment for them over however long that took. So it could be 2 to 3 years based on those repayments. So there was no, interest fee, nothing like that. And when I was in Cannes, one of the press briefings I went to was the judges talking about this award. They said it was a unanimous decision. They played the case study video. I genuinely stood there. I had goosebumps because this is amazing. This is helping people, but it's doing a great job for the brand. It was just phenomenal. And then we all walk away from Cannes and find out that it wasn't real. Like, it wasn't really real. And there's been a bit of they used AI to do this or that, but actually fundamentally they kind of fudged the results. And it's a real shame because it was a wonderful campaign. And again, I spoke to one of the judges directly, Jimmy McGrath, and he was like, we both spoke about it, and that was phenomenal, unanimous decision. And it kind of just messes it up for everybody because it just puts a bad light on everybody, on the agencies. Anyone who's a Cannes basher is able to go and say, oh, you see, Cannes is just about the awards and whatever. It's not about commerciality. And actually, when you looked at that campaign, the case study, it was built around that, but obviously they fudged the results. So it's a real shame. And obviously Cannes have reacted to that with, new guidelines. Like Byron Sharp has given out about, the judges should do a better job. Like, what are they supposed to do, right? They have to take things at the value they're in. So it was a real shame to see that. And I just kind of wondering if they just went with the right campaign, would they still have won? Do you know the right results instead of trying to fudge it? So yeah, definitely a real shame to see that.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think, it is a real shame, and I think it's one of those where kind of post the event, you do ask yourself sort of those what if questions. And I think what's been quite interesting is obviously to see how Cannes themselves have reacted to this, which is the new framework. So as of next year, this new framework, which is called the new Global Integrity Standards, essentially is designed so all submissions will be subject to new accountability measures and integrity standards. And that's from how they've positioned it to protect and keep creativity accountable. But, it is a shame, and, it is disappointing. And I know that of that award, which was the Creative Data Lions Grand Prix winner, which was that followed from Cannes, that AI did manipulated content was used in the case study film to simulate real world events and campaign outcomes. So I think those things where, now moving forward and looking ahead to next year, it's something Cannes themselves as an industry body are going to be extremely hot on. Which in many ways is a good thing. So hopefully it's sort of pivot. And ultimately from the agency standpoint, we know that agencies put in so much work into Cannes entries, and you sort of, you do wonder whether it kind of gets to a point as to whether agencies almost feel like that is the approach needed or required in order to try and win and stand out. And it sort of brings it back to sort of hopefully a peg to say, let's just focus on the work, let's focus on the campaign, let's not sort of look to to sort of expand it by any means through AI, and ultimately let's just see how this work lands and delivers in its most raw and authentic form.
Yeah, well, assholes. Right.
I'm also hoping that it doesn't deter the use of AI and just like delineate the conversation or the way from, hey, the incorrect figures were used, whether that was AI driven, but the AI component is actually not the issue. And so a couple of the headlines or commentary I've seen around is like AI campaigns, rather it's not actually, AI wasn't necessarily the issue here. So just hoping that doesn't carry forward. And I mean, AI's got enough of a bad name itself. It does that for itself, let alone to be.
Yeah. No, completely agree. And, that plus, as I said, like the Cannes bashing, it gives people a real opportunity to have a pop and, look, nobody involved with Cannes is kind of sitting there going, should we just let this one through? You know what I mean? So they reacted well. And I can imagine the panic that was set in. You know what I mean? And poor Tash and the PR team. God. If you want to find out more about Tracksuit, go to gotracksuit.com and find out how they can be your affordable, always on brand tracking dashboard. Well, listen, one of the other winners at Cannes was UberEats.
Yeah, completely. I feel like there's a few common themes that we cover. It's acquisitions, and then food seems to always appear. First, we covered Deliveroo's acquisition from DoorDash in the UK, and now looking over at the US and what's happening in that market. I mean, I'm sure there's no surprise that online food delivery as a category just continues to grow. It's now sitting at a 60% category penetration, which is up 7% over the last 12 months. That equates to roughly around 100 adults in the US participating, which actually feels kind of low to me, but it's still on that growth trajectory. I think the interesting with this is DoorDash is the market leader. UberEats is closing the gap. I mean, there's no surprises that both of their top of funnel metrics are actually DoorDash sitting at around about 85% awareness, UberEats at 83%. But there has been some slippage for UberEats. So what we're seeing within men specifically that make up 40% of the category, that their awareness has dropped from 83%,
right,
and that consideration has dropped from 56% to 50%, which really draws, which I think we see consistently with these large market leaders, is that consideration is always the battleground. And we've seen this with Airbnb in the past, and that they've been around for a long time. They're phenomenal at being rational, but now how do you move people through the funnel? And for Uber Eats, especially within this category, we know that there are multiple players. In the UK, you have your Deliveroos, you have your Just Eats, and Amazon Prime even comes into this, but then DoorDash as well. But consumers are consider three brands, and so how do you get yourself into that consideration set? And what we've just touched on with Dove is a very similar story with Uber Eats, is that how do you bake in familiarity, but then also how do you build in relatability? And so this is where some of that emotional opportunity comes for Uber Eats to really take on DoorDash. Is what we've seen, DoorDash dominates on the is for people like me or the relatability attribute. So they sit at about 42% of those that are aware of DoorDash versus Uber Eats at 34%. And then the other is trust. And Uber Eats is just lagging in both of those attributes, where we know that they haven't outsized on whether someone will consider and therefore prefer bottom of the funnel a brand in this category.
The trust again coming up, right? And it's so foundational for any brand, right? But like, you think this category, it's trust that they're gonna, I guess, get the delivery to you hot and on time and all that. And that, like, if that's not there, you know what I mean? Like, that's a product issue, I guess, in a way. So how do they kind of address that? Because the wonderful marketing communications that we see, like Super Bowl ads and all that kind of stuff, can't fix that issue.
No.
But how do you, it's a full company piece that has to be fixed. It's like that promise to the customer.
Completely. And I wonder, it's actually quite similar to Telstra in that the trust component is very much similar to the service quality component of Telstra. Like, regardless of where I am in Australia, I expect high quality reception and network. If I'm ordering off Uber Eats, I expect my food to be warm, delivered on time, and have great selection of restaurants. It feels like where Uber Eats are driving to overtake DoorDash is more on the familiarity piece of how do I build emotional connection, how do I build humor, how do I relate back to consumers? Because fundamentally, we're all touching the same restaurants. We've all got thousands of riders. We're all trying to show up at that moment that you want to order something. And the familiarity feels like that's really where Uber Eats are going after, is how do they build an emotional connection with consumers so that when you are going to order, your default going to Uber Eats. You've got the trust in them. Their prices are great, and I'm most familiar. And piece is what we're seeing when we bring it back to campaigns and their success at Cannes. the Football is for Food campaign. I rewatched it actually this morning. It's just that they just be on a consistent winner with special with the Brian Cox campaign as well. You genuinely laugh. Like it's a skit. It evokes emotion. It's funny. It's kind of weird. Like Charlie XCX popping up in the like Football food. Like the whole narrative, the whole conspiracy is just it all ties itself back to the purpose of like me being wanting to eat, hungry, and shit with the NFL, but it's actually just hilarious. And I kind of get trust through that because it's great work, and I can relate to it.
Yeah, it was the Matthew McConaughey catching it, talking about it being pigskin that just completely got me down. But in fact, in Cannes, both Dan and I went to see UberEats' global head of creative and brand, Danielle Hawley, and special CCO Dave Horton, and they spoke at the LBB Beach, where essentially they talked about how they built this creative partnership, which is rooted in trust and instinct, and how for this campaign they turned a data insight into one of Cannes' most entertaining campaigns, as we've just spoken about, how it's absolutely brilliant and it's incredibly funny. And I think this is where, again, it's quite interesting to see how that work can also then correlate within the data in a shorter time period. So, over the past 6 months, we saw investigation had rose 3 percentage points from 51 to 54%. We saw that among the 35 to 54s, preference had jumped 6 percentage points from 16 to 22%. But then interestingly, among females, awareness had climbed from 84 to 88. And then to Dan's point about the case for consideration, that also climbed 6 percentage points from 53 to 15%.
Amazing. And I actually had Dave and Matt on when they just made the previous Super Bowl, which was the Beckham's one, Posh and Becks, which was like amazing. But they were talking a bit about that kind of, God, they made that at such lightning speed for such a big brand and such a big agency. But it's, they're phenomenal. Special just seem to do consistently great work, don't they?
Yeah.
Oh, they're fantastic,
And then Uber Eats leaning into the, like how they've described as a new brand platform that is to be more emotive, to really connect with consumers. I mean, that is just, I feel like that's so clear that that's working, that they are like consistently backing emotional brand building at the biggest stage, like Super Bowl night. So it's to be translating quite well.
Yeah, and humor is hard. Like it is hard to get it right. You say it's hard to get something that you're going to watch and genuinely laugh at. And that's a real skill. We touched a bit on, well, it's everywhere now, AI, and there's so much happening in the world of AI. It's kind of it's an overload. It's overwhelming. It's fascinating. It's it's just everything, isn't it?
It's speaking right now.
It won't be long. Oh yeah. So like, there's so much going on. I was personally fascinated just looking at kind of Google obviously coming out with their AI Max products. So really interested to see what happens there in that space. Like the AI overview is kind of a way of keeping people on Google and not using the AI platform. So they're moving at pace with that. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that works, how it kind of creates the creative, because that's the promise, right? It's a bit like what Meta and Zuckerberg were like, we'll do everything for you. So I'm just really fascinated to see how all that evolves, and equally optimistic and cautious. I think at the same time, it's a really interesting place to be, just kind of seeing how that evolves. A lot then happening kind of, I guess, on the social platforms as well. And one of the things we were talking about beforehand, before we started, was, I think, well, maybe Dan, you and me had both seen something on LinkedIn where it was an AI influencer was at Wimbledon. So she's an influencer, a huge AI influencer, like it's not a real person, and something like 500,000 likes or on her post, and there she was at Wimbledon on, I don't know, the final day, but like none of it's real. So like it's fascinating. And then people are like, oh, but you zoom in to the back of the photo, you can see that it's not real. Nobody's zooming in. Like, people are paying 3 seconds attention on this stuff when they're going, oh, look, someone's at Wimbledon. So, it's really interesting. But so then we were kind of saying there actually is these kind of AI driven influencer strategies at that are evolving, and again, then maybe ties a bit into the Dove work as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah, well, completely. And to that point on the Dove work, we touched on that and, how it challenged the harmful biases that are embedded within generative AI. But for this specific kind of AI-driven influencer strategy piece, if we're looking kind of more broadly right now, 92% of brands are using or planning to use AI across key influencer functions. So that's from creator discovery, performance prediction, and optimization. So essentially, influencer marketing it has evolved, and we've moved beyond sort of quote unquote just Instagram pics to a world of data-led media planning, and where tools like Linkwick analyze over 1.5 billion data points to match creators and forecast campaign outcomes. Global influencer spend has already hit 32.5 billion, and there's a clear shift toward ROI first, AI powered workflows. And then there's this focus on kind of mid-tier creators who consistently deliver stronger returns. But have, this evolution brings strategic tensions, which I think are important to navigate. So I think there's this balance between relationship-based marketing and algorithmic optimization. There's also micro and mid-tier creators, which deliver better ROI, but they do also require more creative guidance and governance. And then as platforms essentially move away from vanity metrics, AI is helping brands define like new meaningful KPIs such as sales lift and brand sentiment. So, I think while AI is clearly making influencer marketing more, predictive, effective, and scalable, the human and creative side still matters. And I think that's where brands need to keep both in view to sort of truly win within this AI-driven influencer strategy space.
Yeah, and it is that human piece, right? Like that's not
no
going away.
No, and this was what seemed to be, of all the various different session talks that we attend, that seemed to be the sort of unanimous outcome amongst all of those debates, which is AI is very much here, and as we not with 92% of brands using or planning to use it, it's very much sort of embedded within the approach, but it doesn't come without that human aspect. And I think that was the seemed to be the key outcome, is that ultimately AI will only really be as effective as possible with that human layer sort of on top of it and driving behind it. And I think that can also tie in to the emotive piece, which again, it was Dan was talking to within the UberEats section around like how can we kind of really get this human to human connection and emotion. And I think that's fundamentally has to be driven by humans to leverage the power of AI, but it still has to be, humans sort of in the driving seat of it.
Yeah. It feels like it's such a great opportunity for challenger scale-up brands that if you can get to these effective AI influencers, it surely lowers the cost for your influencer strategy, probably less so on the medium-sized or like sub-scale creators, because they still demand such a high price point. But then on an influencer side, having access to AI influencers that probably draw in an audience that maybe isn't as authentic as a price point to actually play with it.
Yeah.
That channel probably becomes a little bit more accessible, as opposed to what has previously been like the cost for some of these influencers for posts or interactions or whatever it might be has just been so eye-watering. But this probably allows for just more access for smaller brands that want to try an influencer-led strategy.
Yeah, I was going to say, but I think that's the really kind of critical piece, is that authenticity piece. It's a bit like how for example, again, to reference Dove's case, for the campaign that they ran, they essentially partnering with Pinterest retrained AI to generate this sort of more connective piece of modern day or standard beauty standards and ideals. And I think like that's the piece that's the important bit, is like there's definitely efficiencies there, whether it's from cost perspective, execution perspective, whatever it might be. But I think that's got to be a lens that's applied from the brand over that work, is ensuring that it remains authentic, it remains relatable, and it can still connect with consumers. Because I think otherwise you can quite quickly become disengaged. And, as Dan touched on, something we see throughout our data with relatability being a key conversion driver, brands start to lose that, then they can start to sort of lose customers.
then we've got kind of like, obviously then there's a huge amount of governance coming in. So the ASA in the UK have kind of brought in, trying to have transparency, so things are labeled when they're non-obvious, and ruling against. But so everyone's trying to move with it without holding it back. Like, it's just, again, it's so fascinating because there has to be some governance, but it feels more a bit of self-regulation as well around it, and trying to figure out getting that balance right.
Yeah, completely. And I wonder how it impacts trust as a perception. Because I'm sure we're in this awkward period where consumers probably lose trust with brands that are implementing AI, less so on the operational side. But then in the long term, it'll be so, I say so loosely, I have no idea, but so adopted that there is no, does it swing the other way and you distrust brands that aren't utilizing the power and scale, cost efficiency of AI? Like right now it seems so radical and only the minority seem to be using it. But yeah, I wonder how that perception shifts with the dog.
Yeah, 100%. And even outside of maybe the advertising and general marketing, I was reading an article, it was over a year ago, on MI3 in Australia, which you guys probably know. It's just a wonderful site, and I'm a huge fan of the content they put out there. But they were talking to a former CMO who's now involved with a lot of venture capital, and one of the companies he's involved with is I think it's a telco. Anyway, I'm making some of this up, but I'll find the article and I can share it. But what they were able to do is they were able to ingest pretty much all of the calls that they had for whatever, a year and a half. They figured out that there was a couple of thousand queries that were coming in through the call center that were all the same, just all the same, and they were to categorize those. Then they've evolved now that you can, if you ring this call center through voice, you'll be able to get an AI answer to the question for maybe 90% of the queries, taking volume out of the call center, allowing the call center deal with, bigger issues and things that need more time and that were eating up and the call center weren't getting to, and then people weren't able to get the quick and fast thing. So it's that evolution. That's a year ago. And to your point, a brand that's using that sort of technology to make your experience as a customer better without you probably even knowing it's AI.
Completely.
That's game changer.
Absolutely. And that's the other side to that feels like the AI overload is just all the various acquisitions that are happening in the space, so that like Canva acquiring Magic Brief on the optimizing campaign and creative and performance. It's all just a race to we have the most capability that's relevant to our product and our customers. But yeah, I completely agree. I think if you're a consumer and you can get a better service from an AI-led approach, surely you're happy with that, regardless of whether you think it's AI or not. And the telco will be bang on.
Yeah, I'll try. I will find that article because it actually is really good, and I'll put it in the show notes because it's really just fascinating to hear what they're doing. So, well, listen, guys, thanks a million. That was great to catch up post Cannes, some of the Cannes summary, but other things that are going on in the market. And as always, it's just brilliant to have it powered by the Tracksuit data, because that's where it's not just three people chatting. We're actually looking at the data, telling the stories, and tying it to campaigns that have been out for a period of time and seeing the impact of those. Because again, a lot of we all know this as marketers, the stuff we do doesn't necessarily happen overnight, and I think that's what we're able to see with Tracksuit data, and having it always on means you're able to kind of have that longer term view. And again, you guys are on hand to show people the amazing power of the product.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to catch up. Thanks on it.
Great stuff. Thanks a million, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Singles. And I said at the end there, but what I love about these episodes are we aren't just looking at hot topics, we're giving a take on them. We're also backing it all up with data, the Tracksuit data. If you are a brand and you need to track your brand health metrics and you're only doing it once a year, you're not doing it all, well, go check out Tracksuit. Go tracksuit.com. And the team are going to be on hand to show you the power of the dashboard, your funnel metrics, your conversion metrics, your statements, your health of your brand is so important. And as I said at the start, you're able to share it across the business. So you have a shared language for everyone to use and align alongside you within marketing, and kind of moves the conversation. If you've enjoyed this episode of That's What I Call Marketing and can rate or review it, please do. It really does help us reach an engaged community of marketers just like you. And honestly, that one small thing genuinely does really help us reach a new audience. Well, that's it for this episode, and stay tuned for more episodes of That's What I Call Marketing. And if you enjoyed it, please do share this episode. Thanks so much.